Hello, guys. Thank you for joining us. This is Top Down with TCM. My co-hosts are Azaan Barlas and Weston
Weinberg.
There it is. And I'm Jason Cruz. Our guest today is Ali Abdelkarim. He used to be, or he is now alumni for the TCM portfolio that we currently manage. Ali, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do now?
Yeah, so I'm a CSUF TCM alum, just graduated this past May. Obviously, I studied finance, like all of you guys, and I got a job at Capital Group, and I'm a results analyst now.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll start off with the first question. It's kind of basic, but we just want to get to know you a little bit before we go in depth. Mm-hmm. So why do you like finance and what got you into it?
So I guess the very first thing we can start off is when I started college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I went into business, and then going through my classes, I found myself enjoying working with numbers, not like calculus, kind of that kind of math, but like I enjoyed working with, I took a personal finance class, got interested in that, and then I learned more about the world of finance. So kind of I went that direction because it was just the most interesting one within business. And why I got into it, I guess the big thing now is that finance is a really broad field, and it has a little bit of everything for everyone, depending on your personality, what interests you. And it also forces you to kind of stay on top of things, so you're constantly learning. I know it's cliche, but it is true. You do learn a lot outside of just finance. You learn more about how global economies work, policies, how they affect people, their daily lives. And that's kind of the big reason why I like it, along with like working with finance numbers, companies, all that. You're also keeping up to date with what's going on in the world. So, yeah.
I want to ask the COVID question right now.
Yes. Okay. So while you guys were managing the portfolio, you guys were actually managing the portfolio during when COVID was really happening. So you guys stopped out of a lot of positions in the portfolio, so you had a lot of excess cash. So I was wondering, what decisions did you guys make to position the portfolio at that time, and how did you handle, the crazy market swings?
Yeah, so we saw it as a pretty big opportunity, as well as being just TCM students. This was like a once, two times in a lifetime event that happens where you're managing a portfolio and something like that happens to the market. So we got stopped out of a lot of positions. We had a lot of cash. First thing we did is we looked at where we were overweighted and underweighted. I don't remember the exact sectors off the top of my head. I think maybe one was industrials or materials, I think. So areas that we were maybe I don't remember exactly, but I do know that we prioritized areas that we were out of compliance or that we were overweighted, that we didn't feel comfortable. That was an easy place to start. Okay, so we got all this cash, and then we looked at areas where we found opportunities. One important thing that consensus amongst the class was that we wanted to maintain a long-term strategy and not play off short-term plays that are risky. We obviously have to keep the IPS in mind, our clients in mind for the TCM portfolio. So, for example, during COVID, everyone's talking about vaccine companies. No one pitched a biotech or vaccine, manufacturer, because sure, you might generate high returns, but at what risk? Is it worth it? Is that, this is a portfolio, you have to keep the goals in mind. So in terms of, I can speak to healthcare because I worked in healthcare. I don't know if you guys want to ask a question like that. Do you want me to go into healthcare a little bit, kind of what the thought process was on that?
Yeah, if you could narrow down specifically on your sector, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so for healthcare, we looked, obviously, I think we agreed that we didn't want to do anything biotech vaccine related, and we looked at the overall landscape, and we noticed that obviously because of COVID, hospitals, the medical industry is going to allocate more resources to combating the pandemic. So looking at our portfolios and holdings, we noticed that, okay, some of our holdings are going to take a hit, some of them aren't. I know a big one, I think, was Abbott Laboratories was doing well. I forgot what the other holding is. One that I pitched was Abiomed, and they're a manufacturer of small heart devices. They're Impella devices, okay? And they're very niche. No one does what they do. I believe Abbott tried to mimic them, and they failed. And then they also had a competitor of a device coming out, and it got pushed back another year, right? So fundamentally, for example, for Abiomed, long-term strategy, my long-term vision for the company was still there and it was still in place. And I understood that there will be a decrease in the use of their products during the pandemic, but the stock was cheap relative. It was cheaper than when we bought it too, much cheaper than when we bought it too. So it also brought our total cost average much lower, because when I bought it, there was that time in TCM, there's that lag between recommending a buy and actually executing the trade. I recommended it at like 160, 70, and we bought it at like 210 or something. This one we bought in at like we bought in at 160. So it was good because it brought our average cost down. And it's since then rebounded. So that was kind of like a strategy we took. We looked at the companies and we thought, are they going to come out in a better position? Despite taking a short-term impact, we can deal with that. The important thing is, how do they come out? And I think that was a lot of kind of that was a lot of the dialogue amongst the class across different industries and sectors. How can we position the portfolio to benefit after this? Even though things are looking grim right now, while people are panicking, you want to take advantage of that. So we pumped out a lot of reports. There was a lot of back and forth, what we wanted, what we didn't want. And that's essentially, I think the outcome was pretty good. We were really productive. We got weights up in some sectors, weights down in some sectors, but overall towards the end, we ended up actually we ended up beating the benchmark that second semester. So yeah.
And for those who are watching, listening, the benchmark that we are tracking for the TCM equity portfolio is the S&P 500. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Now, Ali, you mentioned about how COVID played a big effect in your investment decisions. And obviously it's important to, utilize what's going on in the world and what's going on with specific like companies that affects your investment decisions. So what I'm wondering is, how does things like, especially in this political climate, like how does political policy affect your investment decisions?
Are you talking about my personal investment decisions?
Like, how does political policy like affect your investment decisions? Like, for an example, like let's say that a new tax plan comes out, the Biden tax plan at 28%, rather than the about 21% that Trump has in his tax plan. How does that affect like your view on securities or the trade war with China? Like something like that would like affect your ability or the way that you analyze a specific security.
I think it's important. One thing that I'm learning actively, and it's not an easy skill to learn, is you have to know how to filter out noise, right? A lot of the time, the political landscape creates a lot of noise, and it affects different industries. Like healthcare is one of those industries that's highly regulated, more government control. You might sometimes see, for example, equity securities in the healthcare, when there's like talk of regulation, they drop in price. And I think the important thing is learning how to filter out what is realistic and what is just noise. So politicians, they can say everything, but they're very slow to get things done, actually. Okay. So while a Biden tax plan 28% increases it, and there's people that might fear, there's industries or companies that might get negatively affected, especially coming from a tax plan, Trump's tax cuts for corporations. It's important to understand that, one, how does it affect that company? How does it affect that industry, right? Historically, how, if there was a tax hike before, how did that company react to it before? I know, and you're not obviously supposed to base off, future performance off, past performance, right? But it's important to distinguish between what's, factual and what's just being said. And I think that's what the biggest thing for me is, when I'm reading about these things, it's like, okay, let's see what happens, first of all, and second, how, because obviously it's going to affect different industries, differently. So you can allocate, if I'm thinking, okay, what I want to do, I'll look at industries that are, that can probably weather something like that a little easier, right? And that's kind of just the gist of it, is just understanding that there's a lot of noise, and you have to be able to filter that out and be able to take, what's factual and what's realistic, and then, putting the rest aside, at least for the time being.
So you were talking about there's like a lot of noise in healthcare specifically. Me and Jason are both healthcare analysts, and we do see like we struggle sometimes, specifically when we see like high growth companies and we're not sure what's noise, we're not sure how to like look at a specific stock in a certain way. So how would you approach a hard to value healthcare growth company?
hmm Yeah, this is something that I also struggled with too myself, and I still do now. Healthcare is a very interesting field. It's obviously very critical to society, and there's a lot of different companies out there. And with the advancement of technology, right, healthcare is benefiting a lot from that, right? So it's a very competitive landscape, okay? And we've seen over recent years how lots of companies have really increased, like, the value, the market cap, everything. It's just skyrocketed, right? And there's this demand for these medical technology devices for these biotech companies. And that creates high valuations, right? Some companies might be doing well 1 or 2 years, there's a strong demand for it, but then because technology is advancing so quick, they might become obsolete, or new competitors come to the market and do things much more efficiently. So one thing that I found, and it's important, a hard to value, as you mentioned, it's a hard to value thing, it's a hard to value company, is the valuation is just one part of the report, okay? You want to, first of all, the very first thing that I like to do is first, can you understand the company? Understand what it does fundamentally, right? If you don't understand what the company does, then take a step back, right? You need to be able to actually understand the company inside and out, fundamentally what they do and how they compare to competitors. Is it a fairly new sub-industry within the sector? There's healthcare. Then within healthcare, there's the medical device industry, right? And then within the medical device industry, there are these, nano devices that are people use in surgeries, or micro devices like an Impella device, right? It can be very niche, very specific. So you want to be able to get a grasp of what the company does, how they're positioned in the competitive landscape, and kind of what's the trajectory for that industry. Okay. Once you have that idea, okay, then it's important to understand the company's financials. Obviously, that you can't overlook that. Just do financial statement analysis, look at their cash balances, look at their debt, how does it compare to their competitors, right? And then when you run a DCF, obviously DCF, garbage in, garbage out, right? It's very highly subjective, okay? So you can use that as a tool. You might not always get the numbers you like, but you have other methods. You can compare the company's multiples. Are they cheap? Are they cheap? Are they expensive relative to other competitors? Or even harder, what that I had to deal with, if there's no direct competitor, how are you supposed to compare them to other companies? You have to find the company that's the most specific, the closest thing that you could find to it, and value it, right? And all this is factored into the model. If it's a very niche one product company, but it's high growth and there's no one else, it's risky, yeah, because it's one product. If that product sucks, then the company's going down. But at the same time, if no one's in the market doing it and they're the only one that's increasing their market share, that provides value. You know what I mean? So it's, I guess to summarize it, it's, when it's hard to value, I would put the valuation aside. Obviously, look at the financials, look at the financial position of the company, and then really try to understand and hone in on the company, where they're positioned, how they are. And then based off of that, then you can justify and back up, like, oh, this valuation might not be as strong, but this is the reasons why I disagree, X and X and X. So if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, off the mic, you mentioned sort of telling a story for pitching a specific equity or specific security. And you did mention your equity research process. How does all of that fit into, and how does valuation fit in to telling that specific story for pitching a security?
So when you pitch a security, it's very, very important. Like I said, I'm going to reiterate this, that you fundamentally understand what that company does, what that and everything about that security. Because when you're telling a story, you can go up and you can read all the 10Ks and do the evaluation and be like, we recommend this security because the price was this, and this is how much debt they have, and this is what our valuation has, this is their terminal growth rate. It's very robotic. It doesn't sound like there's not much thought, because anyone can do that. You need to be able to take all these numbers, right? All these evaluations, all of this information, and be able to tell a coherent, clear story out of it, right? And that it makes it easier for people to understand where you're coming from, what the company does, and why you're recommending it. And that's what I mean when I'm saying you're telling a story, right? It's like similar, I guess, the way I tried to do it. And this is personally what I did, is whenever I had to pitch a stock, I would go to my brother, who knows nothing about finance. He studies engineering, right? And I would try to explain to him why this company is good. If he understood, and I walked out of it, he's like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying, then I know that I did a good job. Because you have to understand that you have to always take into your account who's your audience. And in TCM, you guys are lucky that everyone is financially savvy. They know what you're talking about. If you're talking about terminal growth rates, cost of equity, equity risk premium, all that. But you want to be able to explain it in a way, basically like not that your audience is dumb, but they don't know much about it. And when you do that, you find yourself explaining things much easier to understand, right? And also, if you struggle to tell the story, maybe you're struggling to actually understand what the company does. So that's what I mean when you want to be able to tell a story. How's the valuation factor in? Okay, at one point, people are going to ask you if they want to know about the valuation. You need to highlight the valuation, right? And then you want to be able to answer specific questions. You don't have to like walk through everything on the valuation. You talk on it on a high level. If someone has a question about something specifically, you want to make sure you can cover all bases and answer all questions. Like why, for example, you did comparables. Like why was their PE, a lot more? Why is it cheaper than the competitors or more expensive than the competitors? You want to be able to have a reasoning to answer that, right? But the fundamental point that I'm trying to say is you want to be able to tell it in a way that everyone understands. It's coherent, it's clear, and you get people on your side when that's the case.
That's some really solid advice.
Yeah, I like the you tell the story to your brother who doesn't really know about finance, and if he understood it, he did a good job. That was really good.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll ask the next question here. It's more of like an opinion-based thing and strictly personal. But what did you like and what did you dislike about the healthcare sector when you were covering it?
What do I like? One thing that I like is there's a lot of cool stuff in the healthcare sector. I come from a background in my family. My dad's a doctor. His brothers are doctors. I have a lot of people in my family from a medical background, right? But there was so much that I didn't know about healthcare before I got into the TCM, right? Like I didn't know how pharmaceutical companies work. I didn't understand how these companies get reimbursed. And sure, it sounds boring maybe for some people, but I truly found it fascinating how such a critical component of our society, right, is so much more complicated than I thought. And that's the biggest thing that I took out of it is that, wow, like if it's this hard for me to understand healthcare, the average person's not going to get it, right? It's super complex, and I found it very interesting to see the amount of regulations and hoops that these companies are put through, right? And just the sheer amount of dependency some of these companies have on the government, right? That's one thing. One thing that I found frustrating is distinguishing between what company is it looks like it's a good company now, right? But if one thing happens, it's like so sensitive. They're so sensitive to any changes. Like I remember specifically pitching. Perfect example is Abiomed. I remember an article, a false article came out. It was later confirmed that it was false about the reliability of their devices, and the stock tanked like 10 or 15% in a day. I don't remember the exact number. Just over one doctor from one place, no name doctor, came out and just said that, right? And that's the thing that annoys me is that it's so sensitive. And I guess if you have a long-term vision, it's fine, but it's a little like nerve-wracking when you're recommending something and anything like that could just like kind of set it off, right? And it can go for the better too. It can go up, right? But obviously, naturally, I'm always thinking about what can go down rather than what can go up. But that was one thing that I didn't like about it. Another thing is that there's a lot of I guess personally, this is another thing is when doing research, there was so much stuff, words, phrases that I had no idea, like medical terms that I had to go and Google. What does this mean? Because I need to understand, like I said, alluding to what I said earlier, is you need to understand what the company is. And I remember looking at some of these biotech companies and like looking at the 10K and like, oh, our surgery, this long 25-letter word is, I'm like, okay, what the hell is that? So now I need to kind of get off the 10K, go Google it. What does this mean? That's another annoying thing. So those are just kind of, little things, but that's kind of what I picked up.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Okay. So for the next question, I'll give a little bit of like backstory. So in the TCM portfolio, after the semester's over, halfway throughout the year, you are allowed to either become a portfolio manager or leave your position if you are a portfolio manager. You can switch sectors that you're an analyst for halfway through the year. So Ali actually stepped down from PM after the first semester. So I want to know, do you regret that decision? And also, do you regret not leaving the healthcare sector?
So to answer the first question, if I regret stepping down from PM, I don't. There's a few reasons to that. So I think we were the first class to have portfolio managers. And so it was almost kind of like the guinea pigs. And I hold myself accountable. I wasn't as and I guess generally the PMs the first semester, we weren't as actionable as we should have been. There was a lot of lag and delay. And I'm sure COVID, the second semester, pushed the PMs to be much more active, which was great. They did a great job. So that's the first thing, is I personally wasn't happy with how I performed the first semester. And the second thing is I knew that we only have 1 year in Titan Capital Management. And after that, we're all going to start our careers. And, some of us, unfortunately, cold realities, will never be portfolio managers in our careers, and others will, right? So I wanted to give the chance to someone else to at least experience this and to learn for themselves. And at the same time, hoping that they would do a better job than me, which it was the case. They ended up doing a better job than me. And, that's when COVID hit, and it was very active. And on top of that, despite stepping down, I actually worked closer with the PMs, though. I was still on the PM teams on both semesters. So I was in all the conversations. I had a say. And so I don't feel like I missed out a learning opportunity. I didn't have the title portfolio manager, but I did assist on, the reports the PMs had to send in to our clients. I was in on the conversations, and sure, I didn't approve or disapprove like a report like the PMs do, but I still felt like I got 90% of what they got. And for your second question is, do I regret staying in healthcare? It's good. I feel like it's definitely good if you can expand your horizons and kind of learn more of other sectors. But personally, I would rather get really nitty and gritty in one sector and understand it much better than having like 5 sectors where I'm kind of know a little bit of industrials, know a little bit of financials, know a little bit of infotech. I'd rather just learn more about healthcare, and I genuinely was interested going into TCM. I was hoping I would get placed into infotech. I remember my report to get in was CVS, so it was healthcare. But before that, on my own time, I did a report and a model and a research on Intel. So I was super interested in semiconductor companies. So I was hoping to get into that. And then when I got into healthcare, I realized, wow, this is like really fun. So I was learning and I was enjoying healthcare. So I don't regret staying in healthcare. And on top of that, I still learned a lot about other industries through my colleagues. They had some really good reports. I learned about financials. I finally learned how banks make their money, right? And how interest rates affect their margins, interest rate pressure. I learned more about, things in infotech, in materials, industrials, energy, everything. So it was really interesting. And I don't regret it. And yeah, so that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, it's tough, especially to look at a bunch of different sectors and actually have the knowledge to make truly like fundamental investment decisions. Like you can really only specialize in one, maybe 2 sectors. It's too hard to have a complete broad knowledge of each one. And based on that, so like what I'm wondering is, I know you're a recent college graduate and you are working at a Capital Group, of course. But like, what are you doing to constantly improve your financial skill set?
Yeah. So, real quick before I answer that, I was going to say, if you look at the industry for equity research analysts, you'll notice that they don't cover, one analyst doesn't cover everything. Analysts are very specialized. You had to cover like TMT, or healthcare. TMT is technology, media, and something else for the last one. But that's my point, is that in real world, in actual practice, you're a specialized analyst. So I kind of try to get myself in the mode too, like, oh, okay, I want to be specialized healthcare. That's one thing. To answer your question about how I keep my skills up to date, there's a lot of things that you can do, especially as a graduate when you have more time. And even now, I'm trying to. One big thing is I'm pursuing the CFA, right? I'm a CFA level 1 candidate, and in that sense, I'm learning a lot. Just a lot of concepts and theories and financial. So, despite working full time, I have to put in the hours to learn that, and that's the big thing. Another thing is just reading more about the news, because, and I'll be upfront, about this. There's a lot of stuff that I have no idea. I'm clueless about. When I'm reading an article, like, oh, what is this? What does that mean? I remember, like, for the first time I read what LIBOR was, and I was like, I had no idea what that is, and I went and had to go look at it, right? Or just when I'm in meetings at work, and I have a meeting every day with my team, right? And I have a one-on-one with my boss every week. I spend that one-on-one just asking my boss, assuming most of the time, just questions I had no idea what's going on. So I'm always constantly trying to ask questions. if you want to improve in finance, you have to understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, and understand that no matter what, there's always something new to learn, right? I'm not happy where I'm at with my Excel skills, so I still I try to do as much Excel as I can, right? I'm studying for the CFA exam, trying to get that. I do want to practice programming, but I haven't gotten around to it right now. But I feel like, you know, depending on your role, that could be a useful skill set. But definitely things that you can do is practice your Excel. Definitely keep reading the news and questioning everything. And if you don't understand something, don't be afraid to ask. You know, it's one of the biggest things that I learned, and I learned from other people, is never ever BS your way. And if you don't know something, you tell the person, I don't know, you know, and you get back to them. You try to learn something. So kind of that's what I'm doing, trying to read more, obviously study for the CFA exam. And when I'm during work, I'm trying to figure out, like, how does my job, how does this affect, like, what's the impact that I have? You know, don't just mindlessly do something without really thinking of how it's affecting the broader picture, if that makes sense.
Nice. Yes. Words of wisdom. Thank you very much. So this is going to be our last question here.
Saving the best for last.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. Off mic, we were talking about your secret sauce to recruiting, and I'm sure this is something that the rest of the TCM, the current TCM class, would like to hear. What are your tips for getting interviews? You know, resume building, improvement. What do you got?
So you've heard this before, and I'm gonna get into detail. Don't worry. But the biggest thing I can emphasize is networking. Okay, having those connections. All right. I got my job because they reached out to one of my TCM colleagues. Shout out to Vivian, and she referred me. I had gotten a job, right? And networking is super important. So I guess I'll talk about some hands-on steps I got. It was slow towards the end. I started taking some steps and started getting more and more interviews. Albeit, you know, obviously I didn't get through every interview. I got wrecked. But, you know, you have to learn from what you do wrong. But first thing is, you know, I'll start off as a clean slate, as if you guys don't know anything, just to make it easier. So have a LinkedIn profile, easy, clean. You have everything on there. Okay. Make sure you have a good professional profile picture. You have all of your experience. Don't BS your experience, but at the same time, make it look nice. You know, fluff it up a little bit. You know, don't. You were, you know, you did LBO models if you've never done LBO models, but, like, you know, you get what I'm trying to say. That's the first thing. Second thing, personally, I actually got a LinkedIn premium account, okay, because I wanted to send out in-mails and cold messages, okay, and looking back at some of the messages, I cringed, okay, because some of the messages were either too upfront. Like, basically, I read one of my first emails, and basically it looked like, hey, just give me a job. Like, I didn't show any interest to the recruiter. I didn't show any interest to the company. So I made a lot of mistakes. I'll tell you that for now. I made a lot of mistakes. Okay, you need to be able to make a connection. And I was at first just doing, like, quantity over quality. Okay, so I had to take a step back. Fix my resume up. Okay, you have to polish your resume and have as many eyes as you can see. All right, and as much as I hate to say this, do not use the Career Center at school for your resume. Okay, talk to someone in the industry. You know, do something. Don't use the Career Center. Okay, because it's just don't.
Okay.
And now, it's a little secret sauce for applying to applications. You guys have to understand how application systems work. You throw your CV in, and it's like, a lot of the time it's just dumped by a robot. No one sees it with the actual. And when someone does see your resume, they average spend about, like, 6 seconds or something like that, 6 to 10 seconds looking at your resume. So if your resume is, like, I noticed, like, I had stacked experience, but I noticed, like, why the hell am I not getting interviews? Because formatting matters. I had to cut down. I had to make more space. Little things like that, you know. And I couldn't. And by the way, this wasn't me finding all this on my own. I got so much help from so many different people. I got help from Professor Ko. I got help from Philip. I got help from Alex. I got help from everyone in TCM. I got help from industry professionals. I had a long range of people within the industry help me out and say, this is what you need to have. Okay. So once I had my LinkedIn ready, my resume ready, okay, it's time to apply and network. Okay. So what did I do? This is the program that I was talking about. It's called Resume Worded. It's resumeworded.com. Okay. So make sure you write that down. It's basically, I think you can probably use something for free, but I paid basically, like, and I'm not sponsored, I paid like $99 for 3 months. Okay. And it gives me access to a resume review, and something where basically you take a job description, you copy paste it, and you attach your resume, and it gives you a percentage, 1 out of 100, how you match it. and then it'll highlight the keywords from the job description, and then it'll highlight what you're missing or what you have on your resume. So what I did is that I would take these job descriptions, copy paste my resume, and then I would swap different words to basically match. And I noticed that you'll probably get more rejections, but at least you're not being ghosted because they're seeing your resume. Or two, you'll start, which is the desired one, you'll start getting interviews. Okay. And then another thing is that they have a cover letter writer helping. I hate writing cover letters. It's so annoying, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes they want it. And they have really good templates for you to send it, and you can tweak it and make it more personal, right? Because that's important. And then the last thing is, and probably honestly, I would say the most important things is setting up calls with industry professionals to learn more about the role. Okay, I moved from like, hey, I found this role, I'm interested in it, here's my resume, and getting ghosted. I went like, hey, I know you work at this company for this role. Can we set up a 10 to 15 minute phone call so I can learn more about the role? And that makes you likable because you're interested in learning. And I was always interested, but I was approaching it in a wrong way, right? You want to be able to look. You want to be able to look and connect to these people before you ask them a favor, or be like, hey, that kid was nice, or he asked good questions. Let me refer him. You know what I mean? What's the other thing I want to mention? When you set up these phone calls, one of the most like an in at the company. Okay. And I remember what I wanted to say is use LinkedIn's tool to connect to alum from Cal State Fullerton. I spoke to a few alum from our school at different finance roles at different companies. Obviously, if you think about it yourself, if you're down the line and you're a Cal State Fullerton student reaches out to you asking questions, you're more likely inclined to answer them, right? Yeah. Assuming he doesn't completely mess up the email and say, hey, give me a job like I did. No, you'll be fine because people connect on that. And then a very important thing is unfortunately, our alum, we have a lot of graduates, but in the finance or high finance, we don't have that much alum, right? You're not going to go like type in Blackstone and find a Cal State Fullerton alum. Highly doubt it. Okay. But if you can't find someone from our school, you want to find something that you have similar in their profile. Okay. And that's mostly what I did for these bigger companies. I found people that had something on the profile like, oh, okay. And I would send them a message saying, hey, I noticed that you did X and X. You got to create that connection with them at the first message. And that makes it more likely for them to respond. They might not always respond, but it increases your chances, right? The result was I went from 0 interviews to getting like at least 5 or 6, 7 interviews. I had a bunch of phone calls like lined up stacked. I have 3 people at Google now that can refer me in the future, or is it 2 people or 3 people that can refer me for a job in the future down the line. I had a few phone calls and they said, hey, you're really cool. You're nice, but we want people with experience. So if you're interested down the line, I have their contact information, I have their emails, I have their phone numbers. So I might not have gotten the immediate, I've created a connection at someone at these companies, for example, right? Yeah. And then you have to understand that not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to respond to your messages, and you might screw up in an interview. The important thing is, what did you do wrong? What could you have done better? Right. And basically, I failed a lot of interviews, and I took what I did wrong and I tried to hone it, and I kept on doing that. And eventually I lucked out. I got a referred from my colleague from TCM. And then I got an interview, and then, I killed the interviews, and then I got the offer. So if you guys want me to hone in, because I know this is important for you guys, and if you want to spend a little more time, if you have any more specific questions, happy to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think for this podcast, that was good, but this was like, I think this was a very good episode, and we really appreciate you coming out, and that's all our questions.
Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. This is great. This was fun, and I'm glad that you guys are doing this. I'm curious. I'd be curious to like watch all the episodes you guys have, down the line. Especially David Lynn. I want to see that one.
Yeah.
Oh, we got you, Ali. We got you. All right. This is Cool. This is Top Down with TCM. We're your hosts, Weston, Azaan, and Jason, and thank you for joining us today, Ali.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.